So you are a video editor in Davinci Resolve or Premiere Pro, and you might have heard of different storage and program drives and cache drives and temporary files drives and OS drives. But the question is, how on earth are you supposed to organize your storage workflow, and how do the professionals do it? So in this video, I'm gonna show you how to organize, like how many different drives there are, how many should you have, which drive should you have. Secondly, we're also gonna be talking about the portable storage workflow. So for example, if you're editing on a laptop on the go. Third of all, we're gonna show you how to set it up in Davinci Resolve and Premiere Pro. And fourth of all, I'm going to show you some of the drives and my recommendations, which drives should you be using in different parts of the storage workflow. Let's go right after this.
Motion VFX has an impressive portfolio of plugins for Final Cut Pro and Davinci Resolve that will elevate your video editing process. One of the favorite is M Music Video, a complete music video toolbox. Speed up your music video editing workflow and stylize them to match the story, effects, overlays, camera movements, transitions, subtitles, typography, and more. Motion VFX has detailed tutorials to ensure the ease of use of any of their plugins. And yes, it does work on Apple M1 Silicon as well. Use the code TN20 to get a 20% off. Check it out in the video description below.
You might see that there is few different kind of papers over here. And I'd like to kind of spread them out so you can see that there are different drives. When you start off especially, it can be very confusing, but then once you get a hang of it, which one is which and what does each drive do and which files should be there, then it kind of all makes sense. So this is the ideal workflow and the best performance in your video editing workflow. First of all, you have a drive that is for operating system and programs. So where your Davinci Resolve is installed on and your Windows is installed on, or Linux or whatever you have installed on there. This is like one drive, and that's the drive that you can't go without, and I'd recommend you to have very fast drives for there, like minimum SSDs. To have a hard drive for this is a huge bottleneck in your system. I wouldn't go for hard drives for this type of drive. Hard drives have their place, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. And these are kind of in priority as well, like which order you should be getting them. For example, if you're on a budget, then you can see them numbered over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Second most important drive is the project or asset drive. So this is the drive where you're gonna be loading all your footage from your camera and whatever, recorders, audio, video, all of the files that you actually use for this project, whether you're a wedding videographer, some kind of event videographer, whatever project you're working on. All of those big, large files are going to go for that drive over there, and that should be an SSD as well. If you have this as a hard drive, it's really going to be a bottleneck over there as well. So you can have SATA SSDs, PCIe 3.0, NVMe drives, or super fast PCIe Gen 4 drives. They're all going to be very good for this project or asset drive. So anything that you're going to be using in your project, videos, photos, other templates, I would use for this project drive. Third drive, and the third priority in your workflow, should be the cache drive and temporary files drive. So this is a drive where your editing program, whether Davinci Resolve or Premiere Pro, is going to write temporary files, whether it's auto-save files, rendered, previews. It's going to put other temporary cache files that while you're editing on the program, those will be stored over there. And then when you playing it back second time, for example, the program can use those temporary files from that temporary or cache drive, which makes your workflow faster, because now the program, Davinci Resolve or Premiere Pro, is not just reading all of your files and all of your data from one drive, whether it's the OS drive or the project drive, but it can also read it from the third drive, which is cache drive, where a lot of temporary things are stored and actually used very, very often. So it reads it from there and reads your project files, or the big media files from the project drive, but actually runs the OS and the programs from the third drive. So now suddenly there's much more bandwidth between the drives, and your workflow will be the smoothest possible. But also there is a fourth drive, as you can see on the top. This is the archive drive, and that's meant for your projects. Once they are finished, you just move all the projects files over there. So it depends if you want to keep all your temporary files for the project or just the end file then you can just put them all on the archive drive. So this is where the large files get stored that you don't use that often. And this is where hard drives are absolutely the best solution for that, because it's cheap and very, very reliable. I know it's moving drives still over there, but storing large files for a long period of time on an SSD is not really a good idea. On a hard drive, that's a much better option. But the better and much more expensive option for the fourth drive would be a NAS drive that's connected to your computer via Ethernet, whether it's 2.5, 5 gigabits or 10 gigabits or even faster options for your computer and NAS connection. That means that your hard drives are going to be redundant, so you might have a failed hard drive and then you can swap it out without losing any data, as well as being connected to the internet, so you can access your archive of all of the files you have anywhere around the world. If you haven't seen my NAS video setup, how I set up my NAS and why I'm using this and why you should be using NAS, then check out that video, because I'm going to go more in detail like why you should be using this and why a NAS really is important for creators. By the way, once you have NAS, you're not going to go back the other way, because it's just the best. So now then, my recommendations for actually in a computer, which drive should you be having in like all of these different parts of the storage workflow. The OS and programs drive, I would go with something very, very fast that you're not going to be like just waiting for your program to load. So that's why I would go with like Gen 4 drives in there ideally. And you might be saying, why don't you go with a Gen 3 drive? Because like Windows and some of the programs can't actually utilize high, very super fast speeds of 7,000 or over megabytes per second. But the thing is, it's not the sequential speed that is important for these programs, but rather the random read and write speeds, which is actually faster on the Gen 4 drives. So basically, moving random small files from all over the place on the drive, the Gen 4 NVMe drives are much faster at doing that than Gen 3 drives or SATA SSDs. So that's why the best option for the OS and program drives is a Gen 4 NVMe drive. I'm going to leave some suggestions in the description below for each of these sections if you want to pick them up, but later on in the video I'm going to go more in detail about which one is the best bang for buck performance for each section. Number one sorted, let's look at the project and assets drive. Now the minimum I would go in this section over here is a SATA SSD, and that's going to get you like read and writes up to about 550 megabytes per second or so on. Now if you are working with very large cinema files that have a very high bit rate per second, so some of the Canon or RAID files or very high-end ones, then this SATA SSD is not probably going to be the best option for you, because very soon it's going to be the bottleneck, because it can't be reading those files as fast from the SSD. And then the second kind of upgrade to the SATA SSD would be a Gen 3 NVMe drive, which is like 7 times faster than the Kingston drive, and that should be like easily reading any of those files in any of the like mirrorless cinema cameras, any files you have. The Gen 3 drives will be fast enough to read any of that. Now there's quite a big difference between those two drives. I'd highly recommend you, if you can, use your project drive or the asset drive as the Gen 3 NVMe drive. But if you want the best, then there is an option for the Gen 4 NVMe drives that get you up to 7,000 megabytes per second. And like I mentioned on the first OS and project drive, the random read and write speeds kind of are better on the Gen 4 drive, and that's why even the projects and assets would be better to have these over here. And if you're transferring large files onto the project drive, then a SATA SSD will be a big bottleneck. For example, if you are transferring from few different cameras or like external SSDs at the same time to the SATA speeds, then this will be the bottleneck of this. But the Gen 4 drive is able to just write loads more data on the drive at the same time, which means your transferring speeds of files will be faster. Now the cache and temporary files, very similar to the project and assets drive. I would go with the SATA SSD as minimum for this one over here. And the upgrade for that would be Gen 3 NVMe SSD, but I'd kind of stop over here, and going above that for your temporary files really doesn't make a ton of sense unless you know specifically that in your workflow, your program writes a lot of temporary files or different big files on the cache drive, and you know that your program can utilize your Gen 4 speeds. In most cases, 90% of the people, I think, can't even utilize fully the Gen 3 NVMe. So I'd kind of, the ideal sweet spot for that would be a Gen 3 NVMe SSD for this cache files or temporary files drive. Also, this drive doesn't need to be necessarily that big. 250 gigabytes or 500 gigabytes is like plenty for that in my experience. Let me know in the comment section below if you've seen this even higher, and depends like how long and how much of the temporary files you want to keep on those there. But this has been absolutely plenty for me. I'm using a Gen 3 500 gigabyte cache file in my editing PC over there. So in my opinion, like a Gen 4 drive for this is really a waste of money. Unless money is not a problem for you, hey, the Gen 4 is the best though. Last of all, the archive drive, and this is where everything gets stored, whether this is just the exports of your project or the whole project and everything over there. And the best one for this would be a hard drive, whether it's internal or external hard drives. They kind of last the longest and are the best. Or a NAS drive as well. So after you've completed your project, move all the files over to the archive drive. You can delete them from your project or, you know, assets drive over there, and then put media on there and start the next project and so on. So kind of the workflow would be, you know, the files kind of move down the ladder of things, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Just a little note how I am using my NAS is that I'm kind of mixing some of the B-roll or asset files for this kind of workflow over here. My programs are here, and the main project like A-roll and side camera or the upper camera, everything will be on this drive, including the audio, and everything is on the project drive. But the B-roll and some of the previous B-roll and some of the other assets are actually on the NAS drive over there, because now it doesn't matter which PC I'm editing like my project from, I can have the project on the project files over there, but still have access to all my, you know, B-roll and something over the internet, or, you know, via Ethernet cable, which is like really works for my workflow. Now, if you're a very high-end production company or a business, then most likely you just have an OS program and then you edit straight away off NAS, because you'd have backup for your project, and if your project drive dies for some reason, then, you know, it's all stayed or stored on the NAS over there. But at that point, you're probably going to have at least 10 gigabit, you know, speeds or interface on your PC and NAS, which makes the whole storage workflow very, very expensive as a beginner, or if you're just getting started. This is just thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Switches, NAS drives, cache drives, and PC, you know, 10 gigabit Ethernet PCIe cards. It just adds a lot of cost into the workflow. But when you're very professional and at the highest end of workflow, then the reliability is more important, because there is no chance you can lose any of your project files. For example, just a story time over here. Did you know that Toy Story, there was a computer virus that went around over there, and all of the project files got deleted? But one of the employees actually took some of the files, or most of the project files, home on a hard drive and was able to save the whole thing and the whole movie. Everyone drove back to the employee's home, and then they got their laptop and the hard drive. They wrapped it up in pillows and things, because they knew that if they drop this, if this file or this hard drive is going to break, they're going to start from zero. So that's why now Pixar and other Disney movies and big movies, they're all editing from a NAS that has backups of backups and backups and backups. So they're not going to lose those anymore. So if that's you, you know, take that lesson, because Pixar had that lesson and they've learned it, and you'll never hear about this story ever again. But now when you're editing on the go and, you know, your workflow is just a laptop and you're wondering, how on earth do I fit all this in my laptop? So let's talk about that. When you're editing on the go, you can still kind of, in an ideal way, slot these different things on different projects and different files on external drives, for example. this over here. This is super fast, 10 gigabit speeds. You're getting about 1000 megabytes per second on an external, SSD. You can make this yourself. I've made a video how you can do this yourself. It's cheaper than buying some of the already made SSDs or like external SSDs on the market. It's affordable, very good, very fast, but you can also have Thunderbolt drives, NVMe drives, and that will be like even faster than this over here. Then it would be like 20 gigabits per second or something like that, like 2.6 gigabytes per second read and write speeds. So that will be even faster. But it depends how many fast ports you have on your laptop. You'd kind of need like Thunderbolt ports, USB-C ports to get all that, bandwidth of these external super fast SSD drives. So your OS and programs drives would work exactly the same. You'd have a drive inside your laptop that has the programs, and your OS drive is running on it. If you're on a Windows laptop, then most likely you have a secondary SSD slot or NVMe slot where you could slot another one of those little NVMe drives in there. That would kind of be ideal, and you might not even need like an external kind of solution. And then I would combine the second and the third drive together and have an NVMe like fast, try to get the Gen 4 drive inside your laptop if your laptop supports that. But I know the latest 12th gen and Ryzen 6000 series will support like secondary drive NVMe Gen 4 as well. Then I would combine the project and the cache drive in there, and then you can edit all your photos and have the cache drive, everything kind of saved on the secondary drive. If you want to, you could add an external drive as well. For example, if you have all your large media files on like an external SSD like this one, and then have the temporary files and cache files on the internal secondary SSD, then that kind of workflow would work very well as well. That means that you have kind of like just one drive plugged into your computer over there. Now, depending on your resolution and files, if you want to edit everything on the external SSD, like have your projects in here and then edit it over there, I'd recommend getting something really, really fast, at least 10 gigabits in speed like this one, or even bigger, because everything gets read from there, and this is going to be most likely the bottleneck of your system because of the read and write speeds and the port. Make sure that you're connecting your drives to the fastest port on your laptop. Figure out which one is the fastest, which one is 5 gigabit USB-C, which one is 10 gigabit USB-C, and which one is Thunderbolt on your laptop, because they all look the same USB-C port, but it ranges from 5 gigabits to up to 40 gigabits in speeds. And then the same way, if you are done with your project on your laptop or on-the-go editing, most likely you can't carry these big, chungus drives with you. You would probably want to get like an external hard drive that's much slower than any of the SSDs over here, but you can transfer all your completed projects onto that one, and then you can really have like two drives with you, like a fast SSD editing project drive kind of with cache files on, and then the archive drive over there. If you have some extra like all the assets or B-roll or something like that, then you could use this one. So some of my recommendations and some of the drives I am using or would recommend you to get in all of these different kind of situations. Now, if you're looking for Gen 4 drives, then one of the fastest that you can get is the Seagate FireCuda 530 drives that go to up to 7.3 gigabytes per second read and write speed sequential, but also they have a very high terabytes written spec, which means you can rewrite 70% of the drive's capacity every single day on the drive for the next 5 years, and the drive will be fine. Some of the other drives, usually you see about 30% written on the drive, but if you're working with very high-end, very large files and you're constantly writing and deleting and writing and deleting the drives, then this Seagate drive, for example, should be a good option for you. For example, the Samsung drive, like a Samsung 980 Pro, they're usually rated about 33 or something, like 30% of the drive's capacity can be written over this. So if the terabytes written spec is very important for you, the Seagate ones are absolutely killer ones over there, because these also go up to 4 terabytes in size. So you can have large projects and fit everything in one drive. The Samsung 980 Pro though are really known as very, very reliable drives. Now, I don't have enough data for these ones to actually say if they are as reliable. I would expect them to, but I know there is proven data, for example, from Puget Systems, that these are one of the most reliable drives over there. So if reliability is an important thing for you, then the Samsung drives are a very good option. In terms of performance of each of these, they're like very much close to each other, apart from the terabytes written spec is much better on the Seagate drives over there. Then if you're wanting like a best bang for buck kind of Gen 4 drive that has everything and the best price, then a much cheaper option is this Team Group Cardia Z440 or C440. They both are exactly the same drive, really. They use the same controller and the NAND flash, but the actual heatsink is a little bit different. One of them is like a ceramic and a little bit thicker one, and this one is just thicker on the top of there. But both of these have extremely high terabytes written spec, about 99%. Basically all of the drive's capacity can be rewritten every single day for the next 5 years and the drive will be fine, so no problem over there. Read and write speeds about 5,000 to megabytes per second, something like that as well, very fast. But the only kind of downside with these drives is that these drives only go up to 2 terabytes in size. So if you need larger than that and you can't have multiple 2 terabyte drives, then probably Seagate is the better option over there, or the Samsung drives that have up to 4 terabytes per drive. In terms of Gen 3 SSDs, a good option over there is a Sabrent Rocket 3.0 drives. These go up to like 3.6 gigabytes per second. These are the ones that I have been using. I think they're fantastic drives. If you want something slightly slower, I would recommend maybe these drives that I am using inside here, which are the Western Digital Blue SN550s. Now, these are the older versions of them, but they're actually better than the newer versions, which are the 570 really in some ways. But at the same time, if you're buying the Western Digital SN570, then you get some free months of Creative Cloud membership, so highly recommend checking that out as well. Oh, another very fast Gen 4 SSD that I'd recommend you check out is the Kingston KC3000 SSDs that are very similar to the FireCuda ones. They don't have quite as high terabytes written spec, but very high random read and write speeds. So they're like the best really on top of the charts, and this is one of the latest Gen 4 drives that's been released. It's probably like a little bit pricey as well, but it's as good as it can get in terms of the speeds of the drive if you want that. At the same time, the Seagate has a little bit better terabytes written spec. So the cache and temporary files over there, I really wouldn't go anything, higher than like a Western Digital SN550, 570, something like that, because it's like enough. In terms of the archive drives and the hard drives, as well as NAS, I'm using the Asustor NAS, and that's like a fantastic NAS that I've been using. I've had no problems. I'm loving it. It's very, very good. So if you want to check that out, that's kind of my recommendation. Feel free to check that out. But NAS is like, there's lots of different NASs out there. Pick the ones that you have the most confidence in. But at the moment, I'm super happy with my Asustor one. Another trick kind of over here with the archive drives or the hard drives over there is, if you want to future-proof kind of your archive drives, I recommend you get this one over here. This is a Toshiba NAS drive over here. It's like one of the most affordable NAS hard drives over there. But basically, what is the difference between a NAS hard drive and then a normal, like a computer hard drive? Because they look identical. Really, the specs, read and writes can be like very similar. But basically, the NAS drive has been constructed a little bit differently, and they're more reliable, and they can be used in a NAS setup later. So if you have already a few of these NAS archive drives that you have been using, for your storage and so on, then later on when you want to get NAS, then you can already pop these NAS drives in there and get your NAS system kind of rolling and get, redundancy in a RAID array. Using a normal computer, just compute, normal hard drives in a NAS is really not recommended, because they are not built for that, mainly because of all the vibration and how they work inside the NAS. The NAS drives are special, have special dampening and special kind of smoothing in there, that they can have loads of different hard drives next to them and they can work properly, because once the hard drive starts working, it creates vibrations and things like that. So NAS drives are much better than that. So for archive, really, as a creator, I'd recommend getting some of the NAS hard drives. I'll leave a few in the description below, some higher end ones, but also some affordable like Toshiba ones, these over here. So then let's have a look, how do we set it up in the PC? You know, how do you set it up on your workflow and specifically in Davinci Resolve and Premiere Pro? So I'm using the, you know, $15 Creator best bang for buck video editing PC build. It's got a Z690 motherboard from Gigabyte. It's got 64 gigabytes of RAM. It's got a 10 core processor, the 12600K. It's got an RTX 3060 white from Zotac as well. So it's all white build, but very, very powerful for that as well. The awesome thing about this particular setup is that it can support up to 4 Gen 4 NVMe drives on this motherboard. I have occupied only one of them, but there's 3 free, so I can have lots of, you know, project temporary cache files, so on over there. And one big tip that I forgot to mention to you is that you can have multiples of the same drive. You don't need to have just one project drive. On that PC over there that I'm editing, I have about 3 or 4 project drives because I'm constantly making videos and then, you know, putting them to edit, but then I'm making some more and I might not complete the project editing as fast as adding another project there. So I have multiple, you know, project drives over there. So you can have multiple project drives, but really one cache drive is enough. One programs and OS drive is enough, but having multiple of archive drives is also a good thing because they often fill up the fastest. So multiples of project drives and archive drives, completely fine to have. If you want to check out this PC, by the way, how to build this, how to configure this, it's all on the channel, and why we're using these parts and how good this is, then feel free to check it out. So then let's see, you've got this project over here. Let's open this one over here because that's a test project. And then you're wondering, like, how do I know, like, where should I be putting my files onto? So first of all, this PC over here, you can see I have a local disk over here, and that's 2 terabytes in size, and that's where the OS, the operating system, and the programs are on. Now, I don't have a secondary SSD for the projects, but let's say you're, you know, having one of these external SSDs. I'm going to plug it in over here. And then as you can see, I would usually have the project on the secondary drive. I've got a few, you know, over here already. And then for example, why PC building is not dead. If you haven't seen that video over there, I'm creating a folder and then having all my assets on this over here. You've got your main camera, the screen recording. As you can see, we have the audio, everything, like the big assets will be on this drive. And then, you know, you can just pull all of these assets onto your project. We're gonna change the frame rate, sure, no problem. And then you can start editing your project over there, but then all the big files are still on, you know, your external SSD, like that one over here. Now the cache and temporary files, how you get to that one is you go to preferences and then media and storage over here on the system side of things on Davinci Resolve. At the moment, my temporary files and cache files over here, it says will be stored, gallery stills and cache files will be used on this location, which is the C drive, the program drive, but you can easily just delete it or add another one. So let's say I'm going to add this as the external SSD that I had, you know, just plugged in. Why PC building is not dead. We'll add this folder over there. And then now I'm going to take the tick off from there. So now every time I've got this plugged in permanently over there, the temporary files will be stored inside the project file, you know, kind of folder there as well, where all the assets are. You press save and boom, it's done. In Premiere Pro here, we're gonna create a new project. Let's say, you know, why PC building is not dead. Okay. And then location, we're gonna browse this to go on our why PC building is not dead over there as well. We're gonna save this folder over there. Now you've got the renderer and all of these things over here. I'd leave that, but the scratch disk is the one that you want to change over here. If you have a separate, you know, cache or temporary files drive, then I would highly recommend you changing these over here, all of these, and not leave them as here, same as project. If they are same as project, it writes all the temporary like preview files and, you know, auto saves onto the same folder as you have saved like this location on here for the project. But video previews, audio previews, auto saves, and all of these other things, I would just move into another drive. So let's say if you had another drive on the desktop or another drive over here, you literally click on it and then have it, you know, let's say in this folder over here, I would select that folder and then you have it in the custom folder and then save all the other ones inside the same folder. So all your temporary files of the project will be saved on that drive. Once you have done that, just press OK and voila, you can just start editing. Also, when you are on preferences in Premiere Pro, you can see that you can change the media cache files here as well. So this is where the whole program, you know, sometimes uses other cache files in there as well. So you could just move this onto the other, you know, folder as well, where all your cache files are. You know, at the moment it was over here. So I would just go on there. And sometimes if your PC is slow and you've been using this for quite a long time, just delete all your cache files of all the old projects that your computer doesn't need anymore, and then you just press delete and, you know, delete all your unused media cache files. It just cleans the cache database and voila, there we go, it's done. And the same for this media cache database. You know, you can move it all onto the SSD or the secondary cache drive over there. You can also set an automatic cache files deletion over here if you wanted to. You know that, for example, your project is only going to take you, I don't know, 90 days or something like that, or maybe twice a year. You can just say automatically delete cache files older than, let's say, 180 days. So like, you know, twice a year, it's just going to wipe it by itself automatically. Or you can say that automatically delete all these cache files when cache is reached this much. For example, let's say you have 500 gigabyte SSD and you're going to say, look, when we reach 450 gigabytes of cache files, just automatically delete, you know, the cache files, but keep it up until then, just however you prefer to set it up. Another very important thing for video editors is really set an autosave here and automatically save every, I would really go 5 minutes, knowing Adobe's crash rate. You're really going to thank me later. Sometimes I've set it already to 2 minutes, so it just, you know, saves it, and you have different history of all of your projects, and you're not going to lose that many things. You can also save, like, set this maximum project versions to maybe higher if you want to do that, but just a little extra tip over there. So my friends, this is how you set up your professional storage workflow in video editing. And if you are a beginner or a very high-end one, you can just choose which storage workflow you want. Now remember, I had the 1, 2, 3, 4 drives, you know, set up. If you're just on the budget, just go for that kind of priority and just get the drives as you're expanding your business or so on. I'd love to know from you, is this how you have set it up? If you have any tips or tricks for others, I'd love to know from you in the comment section below. All the recommended drives are linked in the description below as well, if you want to pick any of those up. Likes if you enjoyed it, subs if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.